Welcome back. All right, so power rankings time, and I'm wearing ducks. Didn't think I'd be wearing ducks on a power rankings video, did you? I wouldn't have thought that before the season started either. I would have thought, why are they 32nd? I'm feeling bad. At any rate, they're not 32nd. They're nowhere near 32nd. However, 32nd, yeah, 32nd, San Jose. The San Jose Sharks, these are medallion pucks. I got these on eBay. I'm so excited. This was the set that I was like, yeah, I have to have that one. So, the San Jose Sharks, 32nd on the board. There's not really much to add. They haven't got a win. They don't really have much of anything going on. They don't score goals. They have issues with their goaltending numbers, their defensive numbers. Where do you start with San Jose? That's why I haven't done a video on them yet. It just feels like you're punching down at this point, and it's just, yeah, it's been a rough start. If it stays this way for another week or two, maybe I'll do a video on the Sharks, but at this point, they're just 32nd. 31st on the board, also from the Pacific Division, is Seattle. Seattle's had a rough start. They've looked a little bit better lately, but it still hasn't been the start you're looking for. 2-5-2. I just couldn't justify moving them up the board. So they had a lead on Florida. They lost it. They are the only team in the league, by my tracking, that has had 2-goal leads twice and lost the game. So this is an issue for Seattle holding leads. And so we'll see if things get better for them in the coming weeks. Number 30. Dropping 2 spots from last week, but they're keeping it interesting. Okay, Mrazek's keeping it interesting. The Chicago Blackhawks are being bailed out by Mrazek, looking like a superstar, and then Soderblom, when he's in net, he's not too bad himself. The Chicago Blackhawks drop a couple of spots. There will be those who say that's wrong, but they're 3-5, and the odds of that record getting a lot better, probably not very good. I know that there are Chicago fans that are encouraged because they've been up against some really tough competition, but this is still a rebuilding year, and I think they know that. And so, yeah, they're 30th this week. Number 29, dropping 4 spots from last week, is Buffalo. Last year, Buffalo was one of the most fun teams to watch. I really enjoyed watching them play, if not the most fun team to watch. That was a debate on the channel last season. Not as much fun this year. This is a team that's just, it's finding ways to trip itself up early in the season. And again, if it goes on long enough, we're into November this coming week. It's no longer early when you're into November. So we'll see where Buffalo stands in the coming weeks. But for right now, they've dropped 4 spots from last week. They are 29th. Number 28. Moving up 3 spots from last week, Washington. So some encouraging signs that things are starting to get better. And at the very least, Ovechkin's got a couple of goals. So he started producing. They need goals. They also need for, their goaltending to stay strong. Kemper was really good in the last game. So maybe this is a sign that the Capitals are getting things going, right? So they move up a few spots. And again, next week they could really move up the board pretty quickly if they have really solid results. Pretty simple. Number 27, dropping 6 spots from last week. What has happened to Edmonton? Edmonton, right now, I could legitimately make an argument for Edmonton as low as 31st. They're not getting the goals, and I know they've been without McDavid, but without McDavid, they've honestly been pretty good in previous seasons when he's missed games. And they just look lost out there. This is an Oilers team that's not supposed to be 1-5-1, and they're 1-5-1. And when they really needed a win, they got shut out at home. So tomorrow's Heritage Classic could be really, really interesting because the team they're against is number 26 on the board. That's Calgary. So both Calgary and Edmonton have dropped 6 spots from last week. So they're tied to one another on the board right now. It's not very good. So tomorrow night, if you really want to get excited about tomorrow night's Heritage game, just remember, this is the battle for 26th place on the board. If Edmonton can beat Calgary, they're going to be 26th. Would they be 25th? Maybe. I don't know. 25th, that might be a little bit out of reach. But the Battle of Alberta wasn't supposed to be a battle racing towards the bottom of the board. That wasn't supposed to be a thing. And we'll come back to the Pacific here. San Jose, Seattle, Edmonton, and Calgary. So that's an issue. Number 25, dropping 7 spots from last week, Arizona. They're not putting together a full 60 minutes. There are some good moments, yep, and they're getting some good scoring numbers. Sure, Cooley's been decent. But they're finding ways to lose games, and so they dropped 7 spots from where they were last week. The 3-2 start, kind of forgotten, I would think, at this point, and we'll see where they end up next week. But again, for Arizona, they need to play that full 60 minutes. It's such a cliche, but it's true. I've been covering enough hockey and watching enough hockey the last few years. I've become one of those people who say you're not getting a full 60 minutes out of the team, because once you're following every team, you can kind of see how some teams have that ability to lock things down, and others just don't seem to be capable, or they're not. In Arizona's case, experience is an issue too, right? There's some relatively young players there, so it makes sense they'd make some mistakes. Number 24 on the board, moving up 2 spots from last week. Hey, St. Louis is out of the bottom row. St. Louis moves up. Yes, they lost that 5-0 game against Vancouver, but they also won 3-0 on the road the night before. And for St. Louis, it feels like, again, even though they got shut out, it feels like some of the offensive side of it started to come together a little bit, enough that I pulled them out of the bottom row. But again, when you've passed Calgary and Arizona and Edmonton, this also means a team passed them, right? Because they passed 3 teams, and they've only moved up 2 spots. Somebody passed them. Who is it? Oh, I don't want to say, but I'm kind of wearing them. So, so for St. Louis, they're number 24 this week. Number 23, dropping 1 spot from last week, Columbus. Columbus winless this week. Just again, finding ways to lose games. Getting points, yes, but it's been a rough go, and of course tonight they get shut out by the Islanders 2-0. Varlamov stood on his head, but still, you got to look at the result. You've got to look at where they're standing right now. They're 3-3-2, so through 8 games they're 500, but that's not going to be enough to get you into the playoffs. 500 record will not get you into the playoffs in the National Hockey League. So Columbus needs to pick it up, and they need to pick it up relatively quickly here in a very competitive Eastern Conference. Number 22, moving up 1 spot from last week. So swapping places with Nashville. Columbus and Nashville just switch, basically. And it's interesting because I'm back to doing the daily moving around of teams. So the first and second week of the power rankings, I didn't do the daily thing, but now I'm back to doing daily power rankings updates. The 16-game night kind of necessitated that too, where I was like, 32 teams. I got to keep all this straight. So Nashville moves up 1 spot. They did get the win over Toronto. Saros got the win over Toronto. They get back to 500. And Nashville is a team that if you take them lightly, they can beat you. And I'm not saying Toronto did, but Toronto ran into that wall that's UC Saros. Number 21 on the board, moving up 3 spots from last week, despite the result tonight, is Pittsburgh. So they're still not a playoff team. They're not above the playoff line, and they're 3-5. But they had a decent week. So the win over Colorado is what kind of causes them to get bumped up here. The loss tonight against Ottawa, that's a frustrating one if you're a Pens fan, and I wish I had some answers on what happened there. But Pittsburgh ends up 21st on the board, moves up a few spots. Number 20, dropping a few spots from last week, Minnesota. Minnesota's problem this year seems to be, again, it's that focus, that ability to keep the puck out of their net. They're struggling with that. This was a Minnesota team that was really stingy in their own end last year, so they need to get back to that. They need to find that. Dean Evison needs to figure this out, because Minnesota's a team that's being counted on to at least, be in the mix for and above the playoff line would be optimal. And I don't know how patient Bill Guerin's going to be. Like, if this team continues to, have those rough nights, will he make a change? And will he make a change with the coaching staff? Not necessarily Evison, but with the staff. Would he try to make a trade, something happen to change things up? We may find out soon, I guess. Number 19 on the board, moving up 8 spots from last week, Montreal. So the Montreal Canadiens, a couple of comeback wins from 2 goals down, and they're staying in the hunt. They're 5-2-1. I don't know how sustainable it is, to be honest, but Montreal's record is dragging them up the board. And if they can win more games this week, they'll be in the top 2 rows next week. So 19th on the board. I'm trying to think back last year. I think there were times they were 19th or higher. But I don't know if they actually got into the second row at any point last season. Maybe they can this year, Montreal getting good solid efforts from Jake Allen when he's in the net. And again, when they're down, they manage to find ways to come back and win games. Number 18, moving up 11 spots from last week, is Anaheim. So that's what happens when you win a couple of big games on the road, and it looks like your scoring woes might be behind you. It was discussed in today's game that maybe Anaheim's team is not going to have as much trouble scoring. And it's funny because it was the Philadelphia feed that I had. I didn't have access to the Anaheim feed. And yeah, Philly announcers even being like, hey, maybe these guys are going to be able to score this year, because generally over the last 3 seasons, that's been a problem for Anaheim. Now it looks like they might be all right. And with Zegras getting his first goal today, maybe he's ready to go on a run. So yeah, for Anaheim, they're going to be a team to watch. Again, if you take the teams in the bottom half of the board lightly, they can beat you. Number 17, moving up 2 spots from last week. Not in the top half, but moving up a couple of spots, Winnipeg. Now, if they'd held on and won that game against Montreal tonight, we would probably be talking about them being in the top 2 rows. But for Winnipeg, and again, it's that 60-minute argument. It is an argument I've made. It's an argument I will continue to make. And in Winnipeg's case, it's been an issue. And of course, Winnipeg fans not happy with the Jets in general apparently right now. But if this team can stay in the hunt, and if they can get above the playoff line and stay there, fans are going to start to pay a little more attention when it comes to Winnipeg. Number 16, dropping 4 spots from last week, Ottawa. So Ottawa had an up and down week. It ends on an up. It does. It ends on an up. The win over Pittsburgh, definitely an up for them. And so for the Ottawa Senators, are they going to be a playoff team? Well, they're 4-4 right now. So again, a 500 record won't get you there. And the number of teams that are 500 right now is ridiculous. It is. It's fun. I mean, it's fun because you get the feeling all these teams are really tightly bunched together. But for doing a power rankings, that kind of makes it a nightmare. So there's kind of a vibe thing that I do with this, other than all my charts and everything else I'm tracking right now. Which again, with an Excel spreadsheet. If you had told me when I started this channel I'd have an Excel spreadsheet to track things in the National Hockey League, I would have laughed at you. I would have said, no way. I'm never doing Excel again. I did it at my job for years. I'm not doing Excel again. I'm doing Excel again. So there you go. Number 16, I'm not doing PowerPoint. Stop it. Number 16 is Ottawa this week. Number 15, dropping 5 spots from last week, Philadelphia. Today's loss against Anaheim, it has to be a bit of a red flag, doesn't it? When you lose 7-4 at home against the Anaheim Ducks. It's not my video that did it, but I totally understand if Flyers fans want to blame my video for doing it. And I'm sure there's Flyers fans right now nodding at the screen and going, yeah, you totally did it. You made a video on us. And I don't know if I've done that every season for Philadelphia when they start off well, but they were playing really, really well. And then the Anaheim game, it's like, I guess that Philadelphia team's, they're just done. You just tell your coach, yeah, no, we're done with that. Done with what? This whole good start thing, we're kind of done with that. It's kind of over. So it feels like that. So is Philadelphia going into a tailspin? Are they going to be down here next week? Tune in next Saturday and find out. But tune into the channel during the rest of the week too and watch videos, because otherwise, what am I doing here? So number 14, moving up 1 spot from last week, Florida. The Florida Panthers, and again, they're 4-3 on the season. They do have an issue with consistency game in and game out, but they're playing well enough right now that I feel like they belong in that second row. The Florida Panthers have all the weapons they need in order to be a playoff team and to potentially be a dangerous team when it comes playoff time as well. Number 13 on the board. Moving up 3 spots from last week, Tampa. So Johansson, right? Remember when Vasilevsky got hurt, and we all said, well, it'll be fine because Johansson will just get a couple of shutouts early in the season. He's going to have really strong stats. Yeah, I don't remember that either, and yet here we are. So both Florida teams are tied together. Both Alberta teams are tied together. It's kind of fun, isn't it? Is that, now let me just think for a second here. Is that, no, I don't have, there's 2 other teams I was like, wait, are they right next to each other? They're not. They're almost, but they're not. Anyways, for Tampa Bay, number 13 on the board, they're staying in the hunt. They're staying in the hunt. That's all they have to do is just get through another, 6 weeks. Then Vasilevsky comes back. And then the rest of the East will be kicking themselves if they don't get Tampa out of the second row on this board, meaning if they don't put enough losses on them. When Vasilevsky comes back, he's going to play a ton of games. He should be well rested, right? So that's bad news for the NHL. Number 12, dropping one spot from last week, the LA Kings. So the LA Kings had a couple of games with Arizona, which they were down in and managed to come back and all of that. But the game against Vegas tonight. Now, Vegas, of course, one of the better teams in the National Hockey League right now, defending Stanley Cup champions. It was an up-and-down game for LA. And they're an up-and-down team. I think the 12th is probably about the right spot for them. Again, the coming week should be an interesting one. I know that tomorrow we got 9 games. Or no, on Monday we've got 9 games. Tomorrow we have 4. And then on Halloween we have 2. So I reserve the right to go trick-or-treating on Halloween, right? But anyways, number 12, LA. I feel like that's the right spot for them. We'll see how many games they play this week and where they end up. But again, with records being as close as they are, it gets a little bit tricky. Number 11, moving up 3 spots from last week. New York Islanders. You know, it's funny. Every year, in the offseason, we look at what Lou Lamoriello's done and we say, wow, they look old and they're probably going to struggle to have victories and those contracts look bad and what a terrible idea this was, and who's this guy? Why did they bring this guy back? And then the Islanders go out and they win their games. They play well. And so Lou ends up looking smart, right? Even though we can all look at his contracts and say, well, those are a terrible idea. But in the end, if the Islanders are winning games and making the playoffs, he's the GM to put it together. So the New York Islanders, with wins over Ottawa and then tonight over Columbus, they're playing that stifling Islanders style they have to, even though they've been allowing a few too many shots for most Islander fans, I would think, and for the Islanders coach as well, and probably for Lou too. Number 10, also moving up 3 spots from last week. How's Vancouver back in the top 10? Did not expect that. I did not expect that coming back off of that road trip, things are pretty good. Now, the loss against the Rangers, and I know there are Canuck fans that are very angry about the overtime and the no penalty on Pettersson being tripped, but you know what? They came back in that game. They showed a lot of fight. And Vancouver this year, you're getting a full 60 minutes. Tonight we got a full 63. Now, they took too many penalties, and ultimately that was their undoing. But, yeah, Vancouver looks legit right now. I don't know how long they're going to stay in the top half of the board, but I'm all for it. This is one of those things where it's like, oh, he didn't think they'd make the playoffs. He's such a... Hey, when they make... I'm happy right now that they're doing well. And 5-2-1 is an excellent record. So if they can keep winning 5 out of every 8 games, welcome to the playoffs. Number 9 on the board, dropping 1 spot from last week. And out of the top row, Carolina. I'm sorry, a win over San Jose, even via a shutout, doesn't really bump Carolina up. In fact, they end up moving down. There was a team that I felt like had a really strong week and moved into the top 8. So for Carolina, they end up 9th. They're currently 5-4. But being back from that long road trip, and it was a brutal road trip, right? Absolutely brutal road trip. That's why I didn't bump Carolina down further than I did during that losing streak and just the awfulness of that road trip. Because yeah, it was rough, and you could see it right out of the gate. So now that they're back into their own time zone, I would expect them to be in the top row probably as soon as next week. All right, so we're into the top row. Dropping 3 spots from last week, threatening to drop out of the top row, are New Jersey. New Jersey, you know, it's interesting. So the first period against Washington, they don't look any good. Second period, they look fantastic, and then they lost in the third. You never know what you're going to get with these guys. And they're allowing too many goals. They're a little too loosey-goosey out there, but their record isn't bad. And you can still see that with like Hughes being this fantastic point producer right now, they're going to get it together. And it's really a matter of not if, it's a matter of when. So, yeah, I still have New Jersey in the top row. If they have another inconsistent week, I could see them down in the second row because I think Carolina's probably going to move up again. And who knows, maybe Vancouver moves up. I no idea. If they end up in the top row, like officially, we're into what land is this? Why am I dreaming about this? Why don't I dream of something fun? if the Canucks are in the top row. Number 7, same spot as last week. Detroit. So Detroit's ascension up the board stops. And that loss against Boston tonight and the penalty killing Boston had against Detroit. Now, Boston's penalty killing has been very good. But if you're a Detroit fan, it has to be somewhat worrying, the trends that we've seen over the last couple of games now. And so for Detroit, losing back-to-back, again, I didn't move them down, but I'm not moving them up either, obviously, based on the results. And is the shine coming off for the Detroit Red Wings? Are we going to start to see a bit of a slide here? Did they overachieve early in the season? It certainly happens. But again, they've got those points early. If they can get it back together, they'll be just fine. Number 6 on the board, dropping 2 spots from last week. Dallas. The Dallas Stars dropped 2 spots. They're down to 6. And with Dallas, it depends on the night. I don't know if with Dallas, if they might be one of the better examples of it. Depends on which game you're watching. Some nights they look fantastic, and others not so much. So Dallas does drop. They don't drop a lot, but they do drop a couple of spots from where they were last week. So my picks for the Stanley Cup was New Jersey over Dallas. Right now that doesn't look all that healthy of a pick. But again, it's very early in the season. It's only week 3 of the power rankings, so probably be mostly okay, right? Sure. All right, number 5 on the board. Moving up 4 spots from last week, the New York Rangers. A really strong road trip. And again, I know Canuck fans aren't happy with the way that ended, but who would be, right? Overtime can be a tough pill to swallow. But the Rangers are good. They don't let the game get away from them. They're playing a really smart game offensively, defensively, and Shesterkin had a good game tonight too. So if you're a Rangers fan, you're probably feeling pretty good about things right now. They're 6-2 on the season. That's a really strong record, and they look pretty good on the road. So now it's possible they come out of Western Canada and they have struggles elsewhere, but they also had that win over Seattle where they look good. Yeah, Rangers are playing some good hockey. Number 4, up 2 spots from last week, Toronto. The Toronto Maple Leafs are 5-2-1 at this point? Yep, 5-2-1. So for Toronto, just plugging along. Remember what I said before the season, that whatever happens during the regular season, people are still going to say, yeah, but wait until the playoffs. Here we are. They're number 4 on the board. They're playing well. They lost that game against Nashville. Saros just absolutely steals it. Matthews is playing well. Marner, Tavares, of course, really, really solid week for him. What's going to happen in the playoffs is going to be the conversation anytime Toronto's high up on the board. Number 3, same spot as last week, Boston. The Boston Bruins have had and I know people say, well, it's an easy schedule. Sure, but you have to win the games. Ask Philadelphia how easy Anaheim is, right? Ask almost anybody right now how easy Anaheim is. They're 4-4. So for Boston right now, they're 7-0-1, and that win over Detroit, that was impressive. They made Detroit play their game. And so Boston is playing, and I've said this, I'll say it again, it's not an exciting style of hockey, but it's a style of hockey you can win with. When I talk about the mid-90s and I talk about New Jersey and the Trap, I respect the Trap. I hate what it did to hockey, because then other teams are like, well, we can do that, and then everything became a 2-1, 2-0 game. So I'm not advocating for that, but it's still impressive when a team employs a system that shuts the other team down, and Boston's very good at that. They did that tonight against Detroit, and in general, they've been able to do that. Yes, Anaheim scored late in that game, and they ended up getting the win in the overtime, but yeah, we'll see if Boston's able to keep things going from here. They are one of 2 teams that have not lost in regulation yet. Number 2 on the board. So they did have an ugly loss this week, but I still have Colorado at 2nd. I didn't feel like that one loss offset what was a pretty good week. Was it a perfect week? Well, no. But it was still a good week, and I still think Colorado's one of the best teams in the National Hockey League right now. They are considered one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. So before the season started, obviously Colorado one of the favorites, Carolina, Toronto seen as a favorite, New Jersey seen as a favorite as well. The favorites are all playing well enough that you can see them in the playoffs at this point. Some of them are in the top 8. But the funny thing is, the team that's number 1 on the board is a team that wasn't considered one of the favorites, and they're the defending Stanley Cup champions. They are 8-0-1 to start the season. So 9 games in, Vegas hasn't lost in regulation, and yes, Vegas has had a relatively light schedule too in terms of their opposition, but they're winning the games. So if we were looking at a Vegas team right now that was, say, 5-4 with that same schedule, there would be people diving in and going, hey, Vegas sucks. Look at this. They can't beat these teams. They're going to get killed when they go against the really good teams. Well, they're 8-0-1. So then the comment becomes, it doesn't matter because they're not playing anybody. All right, but again, for Vegas fans and for the Vegas team, all the points count just the same, and pegging along, getting all those points early in the season can go a long way to ensuring you make the playoffs. So Vegas doing quite well to ensure they not only make the playoffs, but run away with the division. I'm just looking for the number 2 team in the Pacific is Vancouver at 10, then you got LA at 12, and then Anaheim at 18. So Anaheim in the Pacific is ahead of Calgary, Edmonton, Seattle, and San Jose on the board. It's bonkers. It's crazy. It's early in the season. Let me know your thoughts. Which teams do you think are going to end up bouncing back that are in the bottom row? Which teams do you think are in the top row that aren't going to stay there, that are going to end up dropping? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video or just because you feel like it. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.